Okay, 2 goals for this video. Get through what I want to say, and do that without moving my head so that I blind everyone with the window behind me. We'll see. We'll see. So, suddenly, Steven Universe has been back on my radar. I don't know how this started, but all of a sudden I'm seeing it on Twitter, TikTok, people talking about it. I've seen a lot of critique for Steven Universe. If you just do the proper search on YouTube, it's not hard to find video essay after video essay talking about the problems and flaws within the show. It's worth saying I'm not here to make a direct argument against any of those. I suppose some of my points may come across as a defense against those or an argument. And there are some takes that I think kind of are made in bad taste and I don't necessarily agree with. But my goal is not to sit here and say that Steven Universe was an amazing or perfectly written show. I did love Steven Universe when it was airing. I really adored it. I watched it all the time, right when it came out. We would watch it on repeat. That was years ago. Recently, I went back and rewatched chunks of it again and found that despite being aware of the things people dislike about it and agreeing with a fair amount of critique, I still had a really, really good time watching it. It wasn't just a case of nostalgia or something like that. I genuinely had a good time. I think what makes a show technically well written and what makes it enjoyable can be two completely separate things, depending on what a viewer looks for when consuming the media. I can be aware that there's a good chunk of technical flaws within Steven Universe in terms of the writing, the pacing, and still really like the show. I don't necessarily think that a show needs to be perfectly good. I don't necessarily think that a show needs to be perfectly good in order to be completely enjoyable. And Steven Universe, to me, is a great example of that. The show has a really special place in my heart, and at this point, it seems fair to say that it probably always will. With that being said, my goal is really just to kind of sit here and ramble a little bit about what I think were the show's really good highlights. Like I said, we've got video and essay talking about its issues. So all these years later, I just kind of want to come here and hype it up a little bit. It might be a little disorganized, a little all over the place. I haven't written a full script for this, just kind of some talking points that we'll go through and we'll see. Hopefully this is enjoyable for you and me nonetheless. We're going to start super easy with what I think is probably not widely debated by any means. I love the music. So many good songs. What would I list? Love Like You. Stronger Than You. It's Over, Isn't It? Peace and Love on the Planet Earth. Anything. Any of the songs. The songwriting is great and works really well for the show. They're sweet, short songs that fill a part of the episode but don't take too long. Steven Universe has always had really short episodes. They couldn't do whole songs even if they wanted to. And I think they would lose some of the charm if they were longer anyway. Not to mention the cast does a great job performing them. Their voices are excellent, but more than that, they're great at having good voices while still really embodying the character. All of Pearl's songs hold a very special place in my heart. Her voice actress is amazing with them, but all of the other songs are good too. Obviously, Estelle is gonna do great. Doesn't need to be said. But they're sweet. That's the thing. The songs are just sweet. And kind of touching in a way that's surprising. Okay, I had to take a minute to look up the name of the song for my point here. But, like, Here Comes a Thought was one that when it aired, I was playing that on repeat as like a comfort song. I found a lot of just simple, emotional comfort, despite it being a really short kids show song. They're simple, but they achieve their goal, whatever they're trying to portray in the song, and they do it really well. God, and this is back to the vocalists. I know. I'm still just remembering. It's like a fun little fact within the fandom that, like, for It's Over, isn't it? They had to reanimate Pearl because of how emotional Dee Dee was while singing the song, which is like, it's so good. It's so good. How could you not enjoy it? They're easy to come back to. What more could you want? That one's simple though. We got more on this list. Next up, I had written down the representation. Now I understand that in 2023, it may not like seem as much of a big deal. To me, it felt huge when I was watching it. And it wasn't like queer characters were completely non-existent within children's cartoons. I still remember what a big deal it was with Korra and Asami in The Legend of Korra. But as much as I loved them, they were kind of a one-off last episode appearance. On the flip side, Steven Universe has always been kind of loudly and unapologetically queer. And it's not something that needed to be said. It's very blatant within specifically, I think, like Pearl and Garnet's stories that were depicting queer women here. And I personally never minded that it wasn't overtly said. Like, that's a good way. They were comfortable with who they were and knew who they were, and it wouldn't make sense in the context of the story to do a plot line about acceptance and coming out and saying, like, hey, this is what I'm attracted to. It would not make sense for their characters and what we were going for there. So I don't mind that they didn't do that, and they didn't need to, because it's so blatant in things such as Pearl's relationship towards Rose, Ruby and Sapphire's relationship, that to say that it wasn't obvious, I think is being purposefully missing the point. It was just there. It was just a story about love between feminine presenting aliens, and it was obvious that that was the case. And as a queer feminine presenting person myself, I like seeing those stories. I personally have a hard time with stories about queer characters where the focal point of the story is about the fact that they are queer. There's a great place for those stories. They're just not the type that I seek out. So having a show where the cast was so prominently depicting LGBTQ kind of love and relationships without it being about that. They were just characters that were queer, living out the story and doing other things. But they always existed within this sense of queerness. And then, I mean, they gave us a wedding. They did give us a wedding. And I'm pretty sure they purposely put Ruby in a dress, knowing that she was the more masculine looking of the gems between her and Sapphire. And so if she's in a dress, Sapphire presents very feminine. The point is that, like, it felt as though they were trying to make it harder for it to be written off as, oh, look, you could interpret this as a straight couple, which I really appreciated. And if I remember anything from Tumblr at the time, other people did too. Okay, let's talk about characters for a minute. The characters were messy. I'm going to say, like I said about sort of shows and technicality, I do not think that a character needs to be a good person in order to be a good and enjoyable and lovable character. With that being said, Pearl is my favorite in the cast. And listen, I know what I just said, but I really don't think she's that bad. And if I had the time or the will or people who wanted to see it, I could make a whole defense of Pearl, okay? We're gonna skip that for now. But I'm just saying, I really don't think she was as bad as people like to make her out to be. Okay? I'm so dead serious. And I can't get started on it because we will never come back. She has done unrepairable damage to my psyche, and I love her. So, characters don't need to be good people to be good characters. With that being said, I do think almost all of the characters are intended to be good people. They are just complex characters. And I think that's a good thing. I think a lot of the times in shows like Steven Universe or shows directed at a younger audience, characters wind up being really one-dimensional. Why? Do we think younger audiences aren't capable of viewing and understanding more complex characters? I think it does viewers a disservice by assuming that to be the case. So, I like basically all of them. I could make you a list, but again, it would be like the whole cast. The characterization of the diamonds was kind of weird, and part of that I think is just due to the messy pacing in the 5th season, which it is what it is. There are debates about why that happened, if the show was canceled, everything like that. So I try not to harp on it too much. They were weird. But the rest of them, Steven is a great heart for the show. I like that he is a lead male protagonist, but is very gentle at his core. He's just a nice kid. I still laugh and think about the moment where he had been crying about snakes because they don't have arms. And he really carries the heart of the show. It wouldn't work without him, obviously, plot-wise, but also development-wise. A lot of our other main characters wouldn't have a reason to change and grow and get better without Steven there. And Steven, in turn, is able to grow himself because of the help they provide. The family dynamic in the show, I think, is really great between Steven, Greg, Amethyst, Garnet, and Pearl, and this kind of unconventional family that they make together is really compelling. You can tell that they care about each other while there's still very complicated other emotions going on. There can be love without it being simple. It all works really well for me. Greg is fantastic. Just a simple human dad doing his best. In general, I like that, in thinking about it right now, like, none of the male characters really have any typical kind of toxic masculinity or this need to be this kind of big, strong hero. Steven, our main character, has a weapon that is a shield. In the very first episode, we watch our main character summon a shield as his weapon for protection and defense. And I think that really gives us an idea of what his character is going to be early on. Though it isn't his shield, it is originally his mother's shield, it's still very indicative of Steven and who he is as a character. He tries to protect and talk and be careful through the issues that come up rather than immediately jumping in on the offense. And I think that's a story we could stand to see more of. And when we need someone to come in and attack, we've got the gems. They are there. They can be plenty aggressive. And they're happy to do it. And you know it's a compelling set of characters because even on the episodes where plot doesn't really happen and it's kind of really filler, it's still great to watch. It will still be a fun time, as long as it's not like about Onion. Those were weird. Just my personal opinion. But we're able to have characters that we love and yet can still question. You know that this person cares and is trying to do well and is trying to grow, and that doesn't always mean that they're going to get it right. But that's okay. I think what it really comes down to for me is just kind of the heart of the show. And I don't mean that like Steven or the main plot. I just mean the heart and the love that the show encompasses and always has seemed to encompass. I mean, second episode, we get, if every pork chop were perfect, we wouldn't have hot dogs. And it's silly and goofy and childish, but is it not the main point? We start there, season 1, and season 5, we end in Steven telling White Diamond that it is okay to not be perfect, that that's being human and normal, and that's okay and that's good. That theme manages to continue for 5 seasons. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to what you like in a story. And I understand that. I understand there are people that Steven Universe simply will not work for. But I personally am a little too old to be doing this whole I need edgy, depressing stories. Especially in shows like Steven Universe. Animated shows targeted at a younger audience. I'm more than happy to have a gentle show. In general, I think we don't appreciate gentle media as much as we should. There's a place for it and a need for it. Does every piece of media need to be that way? No, but there's nothing wrong with stories that try to be soft. And Steven Universe didn't get it right all the time. Some of it got lost along the way. But it's a story about growth and a story about love. It's a story about a non-conventional family helping each other learn to grow and be better. It's a story about change. We see that in the Gems, I would say. I know it's a coming of age story for Steven, but the idea that Steven will change and get better, I feel like you just kind of know as the show starts. However, as an adult, I can appreciate seeing his mentors, the Crystal Gems, who don't think that they grow and change, who are these incredibly old, immortal aliens who don't believe themselves capable of growth. And yet, it's proven to not be true at all. The amount of growth that they go through in the objectively short time of Steven's life for the show is incredible. And they just do it because they want to. It is nice to see older characters make that journey along with the younger characters. It is nice to see a character like Steven change people's mind just by caring enough, by explaining. I'm not saying that's going to work all the time in real life, but our shows do not always need to be indicative of the more difficult, more violent aspects of real life. It is okay to have a show that is soft and careful. It's about a young boy teaching people how to change, being loved by his family. I like Steven Universe for its little moments. For seeing the Gems cooking for Steven, seeing Peridot learning about music, talking about jokes. It's a show that mainly, to me, was about love. And sometimes I just want to have that gentle softness in a show that I can just turn back to and watch a few episodes and know I will be happy coming out of it. Steven Universe could get very dark at times, especially with implications. It obviously couldn't show as much as it would have on a different channel with a different audience, but I don't think it needed to, and I don't think that's what the intention of the show was. I think it would have lost a lot of its core had that been the case, had it tried to become more edgy. Sometimes a show does not need this edge. They just don't. And I think it would have been worse for it in the end. It may have been able to fix up some of the criticisms and holes and valid issues, but at its core, with its purpose and values that it's trying to get across, I think those would have been lost in the process. I can't, in good faith, say that I wish it had approached that more harshly. I would be lying. Steven Universe is a show that, at the end of the day, I would probably recommend to others. If you're looking for something quick and light, if you need a break after everything. For one, they're short episodes. I love a short episode. They're a good time. And don't go into it expecting every message and everything, every plot to be perfect. But isn't that what it also has told us in the end? Of course it isn't perfect. Nothing is perfect. That's okay. We'll still get hot dogs in the end. So I guess that's what Steven Universe is in the end. Not a pork chop, but still a hot dog.